just the hustle of Mumbai and everybody's on their mobile phones. It was almost like those feelings when I first moved to Palo Alto with nothing. And I was like, man, the world is your oyster. It's time to execute.
Hello and welcome to the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast, where we interview business leaders and emerging market experts on business innovations, market opportunities, and macro-level trends in emerging and frontier market countries. Join us for the next hour to dive deep into the world of emerging markets as we speak with top performers who are successfully investing, working, and living in these markets themselves. Hello and welcome to the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lal, and today our guest is Brendan Rogers. Brendan is the co-founder and partner of 2AMVC. 2AMVC is a Gen Z-centric India-only venture fund. Right now, they have over 30 portfolio companies. And prior to founding 2AMVC, Brendan was the co-founder of WAG, which is the top pet care marketplace in the US and is now listed on NASDAQ. But going back and reading that, it stands out to me that you've decided to specifically market yourself as a Gen Z-centric fund. And I was wondering what the thinking behind that is and what it means to you that 2AMVC is a Gen Z-centric fund.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Nick. Yeah, so one thing about India that was new to me when I first started my journey investing in India was that half the population is under the age of 28. So there's this massive, massive Gen Z population in India. It's actually the largest population in the world. And that was what really kind of made my antenna stick up, is the fact that all of these Gen Zers, their first adoption to the internet was via their mobile device. And everything is kind of all done through their mobile phone, whether if it's from ed tech to social delivery, et cetera. So that was the basis of really, really getting interested into the Indian market.
Totally. The demographics in India right now are extremely attractive. And I think it's very clear that that's a part of the world where there's going to be a ton of growth, particularly in the tech ecosystem. But I was curious what brought you in particular to India, though, because as far as I know, your background prior to this was totally in the US and you've had a lot of success in startups, but it is still quite a bit of a jump to move all the way to India and launch your own VC firm there. So I was wondering what the story behind that was and what made you decide that this is what you wanted to focus on in life after WAG.
Yeah, so I know I'm not your typical Indian investor, to say the least. So in 2019, I started really kind of doubling down on building my personal brand. And one of the channels of building my personal brand was through LinkedIn and sharing my journey as a founder through LinkedIn. And that's when I connected with an individual by the name of Herschel Mehta. And Herschel was currently investing out of his family office into US and Indian startups. And when we first met, we had a mutual founder that we knew that connected us. And basically, we chatted about how India is a place that, you know, if you go to Silicon Valley, a lot of the individuals there are from India, you know, either they're on H-1Bs or whatever the case may be, and they do a phenomenal job. And Herschel and I just had really good conversations around kind of the ecosystem in Silicon Valley with Indian talent. But what was really interesting is that Herschel's family has had an absurd amount of success in Indian startups, investing and on the founder side. So, you know, Herschel's cousin, Sanjay Mehta, was a two-time exited founder and was one of the first super angels in India to really have the ability to really like diligence tech and get underneath the hood. So Sanjay was one of the first investors in Oyo Rooms, in CoinDCX, and a company called Loginex, and some other unicorn startups in India. And during that journey, he realized that there was a huge gap in the market with pre-seed, specifically around accelerators. So Sanjay created an accelerator called 100X VC, which is the largest pre-seed accelerator in India. And I thought that was fascinating because I was very familiar with the YC model, had a lot of friends that went through YC, and saw that this was like pre-YC, and just the fact that there's so many founders in India that there was a huge blue ocean for an accelerator. So I took a lot of liking to that, and Herschel and I connected on that. And what was funny is that after our conversation, as I was building my brand, what I would do is I would meet with founders, VCs, angels, and I would just try to accumulate as much deal flow as humanly possible. And the deals that I thought were quality, I would send them to individuals that I think would like to invest in them. So I sent Herschel some deals, and he was very, very excited about the deal flow that I was getting. and whatnot. So we started building a relationship and he started investing in some of the deals I sent him. But it wasn't until I got an email at 6 a.m. in the morning. I was drinking coffee, getting ready to go to CrossFit in Hollywood. And the email was, hey, we'd love to have you in Mumbai for the first 100X demo day. Would you like to come? And something inside of me was like, wow, this is a really cool opportunity. I'm from a small town in Rhode Island. I never traveled anywhere. I was building these businesses. I was like, wow, somebody wants me to go to India. That's so cool. And something inside of me was like, dude, you got to go. And I was kind of at like a really big crossroads in my life. And I responded back and I was like, I'm in. And he like responded back saying, wait, really? And he was like, did you get your visa? Like, have you been to India before? And I had no idea you needed a visa. So I was scrambling last minute. And that's when I went to India for the first time. And it's funny because looking back on it, Herschel sent that message to like 50 people. And I was the only one that said, hey, I'll go. And then that's kind of the journey how I got to India. And then when I went to India for the first time, getting off the plane, getting in the taxi in Mumbai, seeing 4 people on a motorbike, seeing people hanging out on Marine Drive all hours of the night, the honking, just the hustle of Mumbai and everybody's on their mobile phones. I was like, this is so cool, man. I felt like I got some sort of energy frequency in my body that I was like, man, I'm ready to go again. It was almost like those feelings when I first moved to Palo Alto with nothing. And I was like, man, the world is your oyster. It's time to execute. So that was kind of my initiation into India. And then I'll lastly say is that when I went to the 100X demo day, I saw what Sanjay built and was building as something that was like absurdly proprietary. He has really inherited and built a lot of deep relationships with founders and investors. And I just thought it was fascinating what he was building. And the conversations that I had with the founders in India, I just felt like these individuals were just hungry, like their backs against the wall. They weren't working for their first name. They were working for their last name. And I was like, man, I feel like I'm back in Palo Alto again. Like, this is so cool. So that kind of got the wheels turning and whatnot.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, the first trip to India is always pretty eye-opening. Something you just said there sparked some interest in me. Like, you were comparing it to your first time in Palo Alto. What were the characteristics you saw when you first came to Palo Alto, and how did you see that similar or replicated in India? And then,
when I went to Palo Alto in 2011, it was right when social was really taking off the mobile device. So it was like, I think Facebook went public in 2012. You had Tinder come out in like 2013. Snap was exploding on all cylinders. So it was this social revolution, but there was this stuff in the air in Silicon Valley. And I think Facebook had a lot to do with it, where it was wear sweatpants to work and a sweatshirt and stay up all hours of the night and eat pizza and drink Red Bull. And then just, it's your destiny. Like, you can go raise millions of dollars. It was like this fantasy world. But a lot of these individuals were really, really technical and solving really interesting pain points in Silicon Valley. Because I think that there was just so much liquidity that was being redeployed into the market, where it gave a lot of hope and a lot of individuals were ready to take risks, and no disrespect to the large tech companies, but that's not cool anymore. Why work for someone else's dream when you can work for your own dream? And that's what I saw in Silicon Valley, where I was just like, there's like a huge trend happening here. And then like 2014, 2015, you saw the whole Uber for X model. You had a little bit of crypto happening. So there's a lot of trends in parallel happening. And I really just took a liking to that. And I saw companies, I met founders in 2011, 2012. I met founders that went to Silicon Valley with nothing. They had good backgrounds, good education. Some were even international students. And they go from nothing to creating $500 to $1 billion businesses within 3 to 4 years, and literally generational wealth and the amount of scale that these businesses had. It's fascinating to see that. And in India, I saw that same mentality where the majority of people in India are technical. I feel like in the United States now, people are way more like on the hustler side than on like the technical side. And I think in India, majority of people are technical. Even if they're PMs, they're like technical PMs. And that was really an eye-opener to really see all these technical people, but really seeing individuals have not that much in terms of fundraising or bootstrapping and being able to really get businesses off the ground with really nothing. A dollar goes really far in India. So I just saw a lot of hustle, a lot of pain points being solved, a lot of grit, where it was like, this Gen Z population in India does not want to work for Infosys anymore, right? They want to take risk and they want to build their own dreams and solve their own pain points and stuff like that. So there were similar characteristics. India reminds me now of what Silicon Valley was in like 2013 to 2015. I mean, and I'm sure we'll get into it later in the podcast, but the amount of capital that is now being deployed in India, and it is an amazing, amazing time to be a founder in India because there's a lot of opportunity to take a lot of swings at the plate.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the technical talent's definitely there, but from what you're saying, it sounds like there's now that cultural step where people are in this Gen Z are ready to actually break out on their own and not just work for Infosys or one of those companies, which is really exciting. Actually, how we first connected was there was a viral LinkedIn post that you had on the macro trends in India. Maybe you could go over some of the other macro trends there that make it an especially attractive market for VC right now.
Yeah. And yeah, that post was, first of all, amazing to be able to connect with you and others and stuff. So I'm glad that it got a lot of attention. You know, there's a bunch of macro themes that are happening. And I think there's more themes happening on a monthly basis. And I think some of the ones that stand out to me besides the Gen Z population and the GDP growth is specifically like the Indian brain drain. And I've mentioned this a few times on LinkedIn and whatnot. And I believe that is also in that post I posted was that historically, and even in friends that I know that are from India, is that in the 80s, 90s, people would leave India to go to the US or Europe to study and then get a job because there's more compensation, it's maybe better quality of life, et cetera. And then they have kids in the US and they set up their life there. Now we're seeing individuals come to the US or Europe and study and then go right back to India to either work or to build a business. And we're also seeing individuals not even leave India and just build. And I think that that's a huge trend that is going to be consistently going up and to the right as time goes on, because $100,000 salary is really not that. It's hard to live off $100,000 in Los Angeles. And don't even like Palo Alto, forget about it. It's very hard. It's challenging. But $100,000 in Bangalore or Gurgaon in Delhi, you can have a really good life. So I think that there's just the quality of life is changing. And I think just with the opportunities that allow these individuals to take swings at the plate, I think is very appealing. So people are staying home. Another trend that I've seen is I see in the Indian tier 2 to tier 4 cities, I'm seeing that companies like Jio that provide really affordable, unlimited data packages for their people's mobile device, and how the 5G network has completely expanded into these rural areas of India is fascinating. And I think that now the adoption rate of more people coming online is growing exponentially. So that's another trend that I think just over time is going to be really just allowing people to come online a lot quicker. Another trend that I think is really interesting is purchase power. So like we're seeing a lot of families and individuals come into the Indian middle class. And that's just inherently provides more purchase power, so more consumption, et cetera. So I think that's a trend that is fascinating as well. And then more so just the influx of capital. I think that with geopolitical situations arise, people are looking at other markets than what they used to traditionally look at. And I think India, as far as I'm aware, has a lot of really great relationships with many different nations and stuff. And I think that even when you look at Apple, they're now really starting to ramp up manufacturing in India and whatnot. I think that there's a lot of eyeballs on India from that specific lens and stuff like that. So those are just some few trends that I see. And I think that as time goes on, there'll be more trends that emerge. And even this trend that I think is wonderful is that if you look at like a lot of these B2B companies in India, they build in India and they sell into the US. And yes, there is some arbitrage to some degree, but just seeing the SaaS companies being able to really get traction into the US and Europe is awesome. So that's one trend that we see, and we love to back founders that specifically build in those sectors.
Sure. Yeah, definitely really exciting times. And there are a lot of those big trends that seem to make it definitely the place to be now. That last comment you made brings me to my next question, which is what do you look for in the companies that you invest? Are they typically ones selling to the Indian market, to the US market? How do you evaluate potential investments in India?
Yeah, so we invest in Indian founders building for India. And we also invest in Indian founders building for the world. So we haven't, and we probably won't invest in like Indian founders in the US building for the US or anything. Like that's not our thesis. So we're staying in our lane. But, there's a couple different things that high level checklists that we do when we evaluate founders. And obviously at Pre-Seed Seeded, I'm sure you've heard this many times before, even with your previous guests on the podcast, is like at our stage, it's a lot of it, if not most of it, is all about the team. And like, is this the right founding team to go from 0 to 1 and really get something off the ground? So when we evaluate teams, we look at backgrounds. Were these individuals serial entrepreneurs? Maybe they built a bunch of companies and failed, which is great. Maybe they were employee number 5 at Swiggy. And so, a company go from a $3 million valuation to a $1 billion valuation, and they have that experience. Maybe they left and went to the US and got really educated and have really interesting theses around kind of the industries they want to build in. And maybe the fourth bucket is they literally bootstrap, they built products and they've made impact and they made money just building their own, say, D2C companies with nothing. And like all those specific tools are like just more kind of fuel to the fire to be like, oh, wow, that person is a really good founder. So those are like some of the high level qualities that we look for.
Sure. And do you have any specific sectors or types of companies or industries that you're particularly excited about right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I got asked that a couple of times in the last like week. So I think given like my background, I think consumer and marketplaces and just like B2B kind of just inherently come to me. And I feel like I source those types of companies. I don't know why, but I'm very bullish on. So there's a couple of sectors I'm very bullish on in India. The first is EdTech. So EdTech had this huge run up, obviously in 2018 to 2021 and stuff with the Byju's of the world and the White Hat Juniors and stuff. I still think there's a lot of opportunity in EdTech in India. One of the reasons is that Indian families pay for education for their children, and I don't think that's ever going to stop. So I think that that's a huge space. I think clothing is really interesting, and specifically around the Gen Z population. I think that there's been a lot of really interesting platforms that have the ability to offer affordable fashion and being able to deliver it to you in an acceptable amount of time. This Gen Z population wants to wear what they see on Instagram, et cetera. And unfortunately, some of these stores like Zara, et cetera, have really high price points. So it's hard to shop there. So I think clothing is something that is very, very interesting. Obviously, marketplaces, consumer. And I think like kind of these new sectors that I'm starting to look at besides SaaS, which is everyone's looking at SaaS, is more so like on the health tech and like cybersecurity and even space tech. I think that those are some sectors that we don't have really that much exposure in at all. And I think that after speaking with some other mentors of mine that are VCs in India, they were telling me their theses and stuff like that in those sectors. So that's some of the sectors we'll be looking at in 2023. But honestly, when I say I'm sector agnostic, I am sector agnostic. I'm not going to invest in like a gun company or like stuff of that nature, like drugs or anything like that. That's not me. And that's who I am. But I look at everything. When I say everything, so when I think of it as like, if I'm going to be an amazing VC, I have to have a massive, massive, massive top of funnel where I just have so many channels that I create where I can just have so many founders just coming into my funnel. And honestly, I don't care what you do. I just want to speak to amazing founders, because a lot of the times there's two things that happen. And one of the things is if I don't invest, it's okay, because I'm still going to provide value to that founder, and that founder is going to remember the value that I provided, and he or she's going to introduce me to another founder. And that's happened many times, and I've invested in their friends. The second thing is that I want to just educate myself on like all different types of industries and businesses and just be a sponge. And when people think of Pre-Seed Seed India, they think of me because Brendan has provided a ton of value. He's helped out from a business lens, et cetera. And I feel like given my background as a founder, really can connect with these individuals on a deeper level since going to the trenches, et cetera. So, yeah. That's
really, really interesting. So how do you source these deals or make these connections typically?
Yeah. So I don't give away all my secrets, but no, I'll give you some gems. So first of all, I believe that in VC, and it'd be interesting to see what your listeners think, you have to get your deals. if you're not getting your deals, you've already lost. If I'm just going to wait here and be like, oh, come to me, like it's not going to happen. And then when VCs send me deals, I don't invest in those deals really. Like 99% of those deals I don't invest in because I'm like, why don't you just take the whole allocation? Why are you sending it to me? So I'm a hunter. My back's been against the wall since day one. So I find the deals. Herschel and I source, we go so hard at just getting on the phone with individuals and providing value. So the channels that I use, so I'm big on LinkedIn. And the reason why I'm big on LinkedIn is because there's a couple of things. And maybe your listeners will start using LinkedIn. And I'm happy to chat with anybody that wants to learn more about LinkedIn. But LinkedIn is very interesting because LinkedIn, most of the people, so I'll give you a kind of a macro lens and then an India reason why. But from a macro lens, if you want to get in touch with people that have amazing backgrounds, whether they're successful founders or VCs, it's a lot easier to get their eyeballs on you because these individuals, they don't have that many connections on LinkedIn. And every time you send a connection request or a message on LinkedIn, you get an email saying that this person has sent you it. So there's like, you have a higher conversion rate of actually having this person opening it and having to respond. So first and foremost, it's like, I'm going to just outbound on LinkedIn because I believe I have a higher conversion rate than I do on like a Twitter or something like that. Because Twitter is filled with bots and spam and noise and all this stupidity. And it's like some people don't even have their inboxes open, et cetera. LinkedIn is like clean. It's like there's stigma around like this is a professional network. So I feel like everybody that gets a message at least views it. So that's like my thesis on like from a macro lens. And it's very easy to filter and source through LinkedIn if done right. And then the second largest daily active user country in the world on LinkedIn is India. So like, why would I not double down on this country where there's millions and millions of people on this every single day? So LinkedIn's the number one channel for sourcing. The second way that I source is really more so around just building the founder flywheel. So like really just speaking to many, many founders, even speaking to engineers or product managers that may be like connected to founders or in that world. And there's various ways to figure that out and just building those relationships. And then the third thing is, like I mentioned earlier, Sanjay has 100X the accelerator. That's in the family. That's proprietary. We are fortunate to be able to have great relationships with them, et cetera. That gives us proprietary channels that nobody else has. So I think that that's something that we also put our thumb on more than most. And then I think just my own sourcing methods. So like, for an example, I'm really dropping some gems here, but like I said, I go so hard at sourcing and I'll find unicorn companies in India. There's over 100 now. And I'll filter who's worked there for over 2.5 years. Because typically people leave startups after 2.5 years because they're half vested, right? They stay for 3 or 4 years, they're fully vested. Their next grant won't be nearly as high as their first grant. So it's okay. We'll reach out to those individuals and get a pulse on, hey, you probably have a lot of money on stock right now. What are you thinking about next? So I have a lot of calls where I'm just like, hey, it's great to connect, blah, blah, blah. I saw that you worked at Swiggy for 3.5 years. Have you thought about doing your own business, blah, blah, blah. And like these relationships develop and it's a lot of manual work and nobody wants to do the manual work. Everybody wants to do all this automated stuff. Send me deals. We're underneath the hood, talking to people, manually doing things, building relationships. And I think that's been able to really create this big snowball. So that's another channel that we consistently flex. And then just being like a voice. Like you saw my post on LinkedIn. I am learning more and more about India on a daily basis. I am reading as much information as humanly possible, whether if it's reports from banks or whoever it is. Like I'm reading everything. And what I want to do is I'm building my brand and I'm educating people about India that may not know about India the way that I've learned about India. So I build my content around why I am so passionate about India and I'm so excited about India. And I think inherently with that flywheel has allowed me to just develop more relationships, et cetera, and speak to more founders and whatnot. So I'm sure you have a lot of investors that listen to this podcast, but if you're a VC not building your personal brand or sharing your knowledge on where you want to invest and like why people should be thinking of this, I think you're doing yourself a huge disservice because LinkedIn specifically, even on Twitter too, but LinkedIn went from LinkedIn 2.0 to 3.0. So like LinkedIn 1.0 was like, hey, let's write like massive articles and people are going to read it and we're all industry experts here. LinkedIn 2.0 was like short form content and like bits and pieces. Now people are posting selfies. They're really posting photos in their office or at conferences, and it's way more social. It's way more consumable. So yeah, those are some of the strategies that we use.
Amazing. That's all incredibly high value information. So I really appreciate you sharing, and it shows you're putting in a ton of hard work, which is great. I guess my next question would be related to your personal brand on LinkedIn. It's something you've mentioned a few times, and it's apparent that it is clearly very successful. I mean, the post that I saw had thousands of likes, and I think you told me it had over 4 million views, which is amazing. I was curious if there's anything you'd attribute your success in building your personal brand to, whether there are any strategies or tactics that you utilize to do this, or if it's just due to the consistency and quality of your posts that you do post on LinkedIn. So any tips or tactics are definitely welcome. Love to learn how to grow a LinkedIn like you have.
I think that first and foremost, LinkedIn's a content deficit platform. I don't know if you've heard that before, but what that means for listeners is there's more people on LinkedIn consuming than creating. And when you're a creator, you have the ability to have a way, way, way bigger reach without having that big of a following. So it's a lot easier to get distribution on LinkedIn. Whereas some platform like Instagram, you have everybody in the world is posting 50,000 stories a week, and they're posting, like everybody's posting. So based on your photo or your story, it goes to X amount of your followers, and based on those engagement of those followers, it gets to more people and more people and more people. So it's like harder to grow inherently on Instagram and stuff. And you're even seeing it like with TikTok. TikTok, you can go viral on day one. So LinkedIn has their algorithm is favoring folks that create content. So first and foremost, it's inherently from my following is I've been sharing my story, and I've been consistently posting on a platform that doesn't have that many creators. But more so, I also think that when you build your personal brand, you need to claim like who you are on the internet. Like when you think of Brendan Rodgers, you think of he invests in India. Like he was the co-founder of this company, and now he's investing in India. That's who Brendan Rodgers is. I see so many people that post really good content, but it's not like really streamlined. They post everything, and then you're not known as anything. And I feel like if you're really trying to build a personal brand and really trying to like grow and become a thought leader, you need to consistently speak on the same topic every single day so you're known about what you're claiming. So for an example, given my background, it's in startups and now it's in investing. So and now it's in India. So the only content you'll ever see from me is around those 3 pillars. And I think that that's something that if you can claim who you are on the internet and what your value is and what you want to speak about, I think it's a lot easier to grow that way. I think it's also about just educating. It's about what people don't know. So many people are like, oh, how do you grow on different platforms? And it's like, you need to find something that you know that nobody else knows. And I think that it's way easier said than done, but like, I think that is, and you consistently flex that muscle every single day. And then all of a sudden people know you as X, Y, and Z because you've educated them in something they don't know. So I attribute all of that to the LinkedIn growth and whatnot. And then obviously if you really peel back the onion, there's how to create a post, how to structure a post, how to create more engagement around a post, who to comment on their post to get more engagement. Like you can really kind of peel back that onion and start like experimenting and A/B testing what's working, what's not working, and then what is working, double, triple down on that. But I encourage everybody to build a personal brand on LinkedIn. Like just because you work at Google doesn't mean that you can't build a personal brand in the evening. Talk about what you're really passionate about. So
Definitely. Yeah. Great advice there. I guess one other question that's somewhat related is how did you build up your knowledge of investing in India? I mean, the first question would be like, were there any major surprises in terms of dealing with the culture of the startups there that were different from what you were used to? And then secondly, now you would probably be viewed as a thought leader when it comes to VC in India. What was the process from having no exposure to investing in India and then becoming someone who people come to for knowledge about it?
That's a really great question. So when I set off on this journey, I knew that I had to partner with somebody that was ahead of the race. I'm sitting in Florida right now. I don't think many people in Florida are investing in the top 1% of startups in India. And I wouldn't have been able to do this, just me. This would not be happening. So first and foremost, I partnered with an individual that is absurdly smart, absurdly personable, and his family has already invested in unicorns and we're founders. So inherently, I inherited a lot of that network and that trust in those introductions. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a head start in the race than just starting from square one. So I think first and foremost, that was something that I was able to, I think that really helped. And then also when I made the decision of I'm going to invest in India, I knew I had to learn about the market and I had to do whatever it takes to be knowledgeable and stuff. So what I did was I did a ton of research. I read a ton of books. I was consistently researching the unicorns. And what I did was, and I think this is why one of the reasons why Herschel partnered with me is I looked at all the top 30 unicorns of 2020 and 2021. I went on Crunchbase and I looked at the seed rounds. And I hit up every single angel in every one of those companies on LinkedIn. And I said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I want to do. Do you have 10 minutes to talk to me on the phone? My conversion rate was maybe 50%. I get on the phone with these angels invested in unicorns, multiple unicorns, and they're all in the same deals, which is hilarious because the last 20 companies, the whole seat, every single angel is in every single deal together. So I'm like, okay, well, if I can provide value to these individuals, maybe they'll let me into a deal or maybe we can develop a relationship. So I started getting on the phone with these unicorn founders and these angels, and I would ask them, what do you think about my thesis? What do you think about me being in the US? What do you think my value add is? And I would A/B test the shit out of these conversations. And then I would see what the trend was, what most people are saying. And then I'd go to Herschel and be like, oh, I just spoke with this, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, wow, you got on the phone with these individuals? Like, this is great. Like, now this kid has the ability to get on the phone with people. This could be a really good partnership. So in those conversations, I also learned a lot about India. I asked questions. What are you going to invest in the next year? What trends should you? So I'd write them down. Oh, space tech, health tech. And then I would do a ton of research on like these startups and why this industry is where it is. And I told myself, if I'm going to invest in this country, I need to be the best. And if I'm going to be the best, I'm going to give it whatever it takes. I'm going to lay everything out on the field. And that's just me that's just who I am. And my personality is like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to execute the shit out of it. And even if I fail, at least I'm going to go down swinging. And I think that with that passion and that motivation, and also Herschel was also on the same page where he was also at a crossroads, but starting to figure out what was next. And it was our frequencies aligned at the very same time. And I think both energies, we fed off each other of like, man, let's do this. Like, this is great. And his brain, he's like a CPA, he's analytical, he's a pure genius. I'm the complete opposite. Like, I am like the last person on planet Earth that did really good on SAT scores. And I think that really allowed us to kind of like, share opposite skill sets and really meet in the middle and whatnot. So that's how I really educated myself. I'm like super passionate when I do something. As you can tell through like me speaking, is like, if I'm going to invest in this country and I have amazing LPs that are counting on me to be the best investor as humanly possible, I'm going to do the work that nobody else wants to do that. Because I could prove myself. I proved myself as a founder. But I didn't prove to anybody in this world that I can invest in companies. And that's two different types of people. Most founders, it's hard to be a really good investor. So yeah, man, I'm all fired up. I love this. I think that investing in pre-seed seed is so much fun. Yeah, I'm so excited about this, as you can tell.
For sure. Yeah, I can definitely see the passion and enthusiasm and your dedicated hustle to it coming through in your words here. One follow-up to that maybe would be, are there any companies that you've invested in so far that you're especially excited about, or industries that you're most excited to play in right now?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you a company that we recently invested in. And I spoke about fashion. And I think that there's one company we led the pre-seed round. It's called Numi.Asia. And it's basically the Shein of India. So I'm assuming you know what Shein is, right?
Right. That's the fast fashion brand out of China that's been really successful over the past few years, isn't it?
Yeah. So fast fashion, extremely affordable, thousands of SKUs. And we're super bullish on this space. And the founders are phenomenal. We're very, very grateful to be a part of this deal. They're basically creating a platform. So, Gen Z India has the ability to order clothes in a very fast manner and choose from many, many different designs at a very affordable price. So they're starting with females, and the females are the retention and frequency on orders is growing exponentially. And we think that these individuals, they want Squid Game t-shirts. They don't want to wear ethnic wear that they used to wear all the time. And there's no issues with that. It's just that now they see people on Instagram and these other platforms are like, oh, wow, I want to buy clothes like this. And H&M and Zara is like, it's a really high price point. So this company, Numi, really, solves that gap and stuff. So super, super, super bullish on that in that business. Another company is called AppTheMart. And AppTheMart has a kind of like an OYO model where it's like a turnkey solution for Kiranas in tier 2 and tier 3 India. So Kirana is like, think about you've been to India, you know exactly what a Kirana is, but for your viewers, think of it as a little corner bodega convenience store. AppTheMart really, they turn these Kiranas in the tier 2 and tier 3 Indian cities into AppTheMarts, and they help with delivery and digitization on the back end and stuff like that. So really, really excited about that business. And yeah, there's so many. Those are the ones that I think just come to mind because I spoke to the founders super recently. But, our portfolio consists of EdTech, SaaS, consumer marketplaces, little Web3. We want to have exposure everywhere and stuff like that and just try to provide as much value as humanly possible.
That's really interesting. I think I can see huge potential in both of those. Are you looking at any other South Asian countries besides India, like Bangladesh or Pakistan, or are you mostly just focused on India right now?
So that's another really good question. So as of now, just India. I want to stay in my lane. There's no reason to do anything else. I'm all India. I know that obviously other like the tier ones like Sequoia and Lightspeed, great funds. Obviously, their funds that invest in India also invest in Southeast Asia. I just think that since it's Herschel and I now, and we have our thesis and we've been able to outperform and get into amazing deals and really see a lot of movement in the portfolio, it's why change things up now. However, I did a personal investment into a company called CraveMart in Pakistan, which is essentially, it's a QCOM company, so delivery within 15 minutes or less in Pakistan. The founder is absolutely exceptional. He used to be an executive at Duraz. And I'm very, very bullish on the business and the company he's created in the market. But I am not currently looking at other investments through the fund in the other countries. I think that I'll be making just random angel investments kind of just through founders that I meet and stuff like that. But again, I think that in life, if you just spread yourself too thin, you don't go anywhere. So it's like, I feel like do what works, A/B test. And then when you see something that's working, stick to it and then double and triple down on it. And I'm not saying I'm never going to invest in those countries. It's just that right now, I think that our machine and our playbook is working. It's scalable. It's frictionless. So, why change things right now?
Sure. India's more than big enough of a market itself, so may as well focus there for now. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, or do you have any ways that the audience could help you, any asks that you might have?
Yeah. I'd love to, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and reach out if you're building. Would love to, we look at everything. Doesn't matter where you go to school, where you used to work, what city you're from. We look at everything. If it's not for us, it's not for us, but we don't not look at specific things. We look at everything. And I think that's been one thing. It's how it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of manual work. But what I said earlier in the podcast is most people don't do the manual work. And we know as previous founders that you do the manual work and you understand who your customers are and you understand what works and what doesn't work, then you can grow a lot faster and provide an amazing experience. So yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and reach out. My email is brendan@2amvc.com. And then if there's any value that I can provide, please let me know. But yeah, no, that's it. This is wonderful. As you can tell, I'm extremely passionate. I'm going to India tomorrow. As I mentioned earlier, the last time I was in India was last February. And I'm so excited to go back and to go to Bangalore, Mumbai, and Gurgaon and stuff like that. So very, very excited. And I appreciate everybody listening and really excited to connect with everybody. And thank you so much, Nick, for having me on. This is really cool. You asked really, really good questions. And I love emerging markets. Everybody thinks they have to be in Silicon Valley to be successful. And I was one of those people. And I think that going to Silicon Valley, it's a good way to build your network and to really, see what the big leagues is all about. But I think as the world changed from 2011 up until now with COVID and distributed teams and stuff like that, and these markets that are growing besides the US, there's no reason why you have to be in Silicon Valley. I think you can be successful anywhere. So really cool podcast. And thank you so much for having me on. I'm super grateful for this opportunity.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Brendan. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast. To stay up to date on events we may be hosting, emerging market news, and to build your personal network, please feel free to join the INSEAD Alumni Emerging Markets Interest Group on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the INSEAD Emerging Markets Podcast. To stay up to date on events we may be hosting, emerging market news, and to build your personal network, please feel free to join the INSEAD Alumni Emerging Markets Interest Group on LinkedIn.